Hey guys, welcome to another video from Historic Militaria. Today we're going to be looking at a somewhat unusual German M40 helmet. And this is a standard M40, but this one saw use by the Finnish during World War II, which might seem kind of counterintuitive to a lot of folks, but the Finns actually were semi-allied with the Germans through the majority of World War II. And used a lot of German equipment, including earlier World War I helmets and certainly a lot of German World War II helmets, including a number of M40s. Now, sort of the dead giveaway on this helmet that it's Finnish used is this stylized skull here, which, as you can see, this helmet is pretty much in relic condition. Really no original paint left. Looks like it was out in the weather for a long time. I don't think it was buried, but it's certainly seen a lot of use, and we'll kind of get to some of the other aspects of it, maybe some history of it shortly. But first, looking at this skull here, you see this stylized skull, which doesn't look like a typical German skull that you might see, one of the German Totenkopfs. You also have these stylized rib bones. Sometimes you see them with 2, sometimes you see them with 3. A lot of these were hand painted, obviously, and there was no real necessary stylization of it. To give you a little bit of history, in 1939, during the Winter War, when the Finns were fighting the Soviets, a battalion, I believe there was called and I'm going to butcher this because I don't speak Finnish, but the Kevyt Osasto 4, which translates into the Light Detachment number 4, were commanded by a guy named Alfons Sundblad, or could be Youngblood. I'm bad on the pronunciation, I fully admit that. But he commanded, and he really liked the skull. So he sort of introduced it into use by his troops, and you'll see skull pins and skull belt buckles and all kinds of skull stuff in that detachment. And they used a very large skull, sort of a cartoonish type skull that stretched out along the sides and in the back. And what it did is it actually broke up a lot of the paint that was on the helmets that they were using at the time, which would be German M16s usually. And it broke that up and made it a little bit harder to see in the winter conditions. So that was pretty typical. You see a fair amount of those. There's a lot of pictures of Finnish soldiers wearing them. As a matter of fact, there's a great picture in 1942 of a celebration of General Mannerheim's 75th birthday, and all the soldiers from the detachment are wearing this mishmash of helmets, everything from Italian to German to Hungarian, kind of you name it, whatever they could find, and they all have skulls painted on the front of them. But and then what happened is during World War II in 1941, the Soviets again went to war with Finland, and this started the continuation war in 1941, and that was during the summer months. So it started in the summer. You didn't really want to have this giant white skull on your helmet, so the skulls became much smaller because you didn't need to hide in the snow. So you'll see one like this, and that sort of indicates a later use. Also, the helmet is an M40, so definitely a later helmet than continuation war use. And these would have been used by a detachment that went by the 1/JR46, which actually had the informal nickname of the Skull Battalion, which was also commanded by Alfons Sundblad. And he actually went on to survive the war and became a politician and all kinds of stuff in Finland. He had been a lawyer before the war, so just kind of an interesting little tidbit. But looking at this specific helmet, so as we can see, it is in pretty much relic condition. It is a nice, solid example, though, of your M40, and you can tell that from the vent holes here. And just kind of looking at it, it does have barbed wire around it, which I should address because there's a lot of folks who seem to think that barbed wire is not ever used in combat situations. And it is true, there's not a lot of pictures of it used. There's a lot of downsides to using barbed wire. Obviously, it's got the barbs, which are sharp and pretty unusual to use, but there are pictures of Finnish soldiers actually using barbed wire during the continuation war, and I will be happy to provide those as a link in the comment section, and you can read about it and take a look and judge for yourself. I'm really not interested in having a debate about whether or not barbed wire is practical or not. I don't think it is, but here it is on the helmet, and this is where we're at. And there is enough historical evidence to show that it was in fact used. This helmet has got a pretty big dent right here, which led to a crack and a crack along. And then you have this hole in the top of the helmet, which is indicative of a nail piercing. So this helmet was probably a grave marker, a temporary grave marker on the battlefield until a permanent grave was established. You see a lot of pictures of those, or grave sort of displays of a number of helmets of soldiers who were killed or wounded, nailed onto pieces of wood. I've seen ones that were nailed on with horseshoe nails, or just really kind of any kind of nail that you can find. And that's kind of indicative also of this nail hole, which is not a typical round nail hole. That could well be some sort of square nail, horseshoe nail, something like that. And taking a look at the inside of the helmet, as you can see, there's no liner or anything. That's all weathered out. And you've got your crack, you've got your typical German helmet. This does have the remains of a lot number here on the back. Unfortunately, the left side, if there was anything, is long gone, long rusted out. Any kind of maker's marks or anything like that are now illegible. There's what looks like something left over, but nothing that can be read. But just a very interesting example of a continuation war helmet. German manufacturer, used by the Finns, something you don't see very often, even though this one is in pretty much very well used condition, but nonetheless a very interesting example of something that came out of a sort of a lesser known part of World War II, and just something that I wanted to share with you. Obviously, if you have one of these in excellent condition, or you can add to this, I would definitely love to know anything about it. So please do comment in the comments. And as always, remember to like and subscribe, and we will always be looking at interesting and unusual militaria, firearms, all kinds of good stuff like that. So thanks for watching.